So welcome to you all. Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So, as we are proceeding with our classes on the Buddha and his Dhamma, and today we are going to look at the section 4 of the Buddha and his Dhamma, which has about 3 subsections. But these sections are long and they're very important because we have seen that this part of the Buddha and his Dhamma is very important in a sense that the Baba Sahib Ambedkar has tried to give a complete philosophy of the Dhamma, which is known as Saddhamma. And in this Saddhamma section, we are looking at the section 4 today, which is titled as Dhamma to be Saddhamma must pull down all social barriers. Now this heading itself, that Dhamma to be Saddhamma must pull down all these social barriers. So as we live in the world, we know that there are many barriers between them, and those barriers disconnect one human being from another human being, and therefore it's very difficult for a human being to have a life which is the life of a harmony, which is the life of fulfillment, and which is a life of a human. And we have seen that there are many social barriers, like the barriers of race, the barriers of caste, the barriers of gender, and so on and so forth, rich and poor. There are so many barriers between the human beings. But as the Buddha found out that there is no fundamental difference between the human beings. The human beings cannot be ranked. And in the Zen teachings, it is said that the Buddha is a person without a rank. And to attain a person without a rank is the goal of Buddhism. So we see that there is an hierarchy, there is casteism, there is racism, there is gender biases, so on and so forth. There are so many social barriers between the people. There are linguistic barriers, there are regional barriers, and you can name it. But what the Buddha found out, that there is a fundamental unity, there is a fundamental identification of one man with another man. And that's why the Buddha very categorically said that the purpose of the Dhamma is to pull down all social barriers. And Baba Sahib Ambedkar has given it a very interesting sort of a heading, and it's in fact divided into three subsections. So we are going to look at today the first subsection of the section 4, because a long one, and this discussion is very relevant to our present circumstances that take place in our country. So the subsection of the section 4 is titled as Dhamma to be Saddhamma must break down barriers between man and man. So we know that as a human beings, we are not atomized human beings. We are not individualistic human beings, but we become a human being by virtue of our relationship with another human being. And we often hear this quote that the man is a social animal. And we know that we cannot be without the other human beings, because the surviving skills that are needed to be a human being, that are given by other human beings, like the society, for example, the language that we speak is given by the society, and so on and so forth. So we know that it's not, a human life is not possible without other human being, and therefore the purpose of the Dhamma is to break down the barriers between man and man. And that's what here Baba Sahib Ambedkar begins with the context of India. He says, he begins with a context of an ideal society. So he asks a question. What is an ideal society? And according to the Brahmins, the Vedas have defined what is an ideal society. And the Vedas being infallible, that is the only ideal society man can accept. So we know this Brahminical conception of a ideal society based on Chaturvarna. And it's called Chaturvarna according to, the Baba Sahib mentioned that in the verse number 2. And in the verse number 3, he says that such a society according to Vedas must satisfy 3 conditions. Condition number 1, it must be composed of 4 classes: Brahmins, Kshatriya, Vaishyas, and Shudras. According to their conception of things, the society must, be composed of Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. The interrelationship or the interrelations of these classes must be regulated by the principle of graded inequality. Now, this principle of graded inequality is very important for us to understand. So, in the world, all over the places, there is inequality. But when it comes to Chaturvarna, it's a very peculiar kind of an inequality, which Baba Ambedkar defined it in terms of a phrase called graded inequality. So, if in the normal hierarchy that we witness in the world, there are masters and slaves, there are rich and poor, there are high and low. But here in the Chaturvarna, we have the highest, higher, high, low, lower, lowest. And within each of these highs and lows, we get this categorization of highs and lows. Okay, so it's a very complex sort of a system of inequality that is called the Chaturvarna, which Baba Ambedkar called this system of graded inequality. In other words, all these classes are not to be on equal level, but to be one above the other in point of status, rights, and privileges. So the status, rights, and privileges vary according to your caste, according to where you are placed in this graded inequality. So the verse number 6 says that the Brahmins were placed at the top, the Kshatriyas were placed below the Brahmins, but above the Vaishyas were placed below the Kshatriyas, but above the Shudras, and the Shudras were placed the lowest of all. Now, this 6th verse of the Buddha and his Dhamma, it defines very categorically the system of graded inequality. You replace these words by the caste today, and you begin to see that how the system of graded inequality works. One caste is above some caste and below some caste. And there is an underlying principle here where this graded inequality is involved is salute above and kick below. That's what is all about the caste system. That is what is all about the system of graded inequality. That is what is all about the Chaturvarna. The third feature of Chaturvarna was that each class must engage itself in an occupation assigned to it. The Brahmins' occupation was to learn, teach, and officiate at religious ceremonies. The Kshatriyas' occupation was to bear arms and to fight. The occupation of the Vaishyas was trade and business. The Shudras' occupation was to do menial service for all the 3 superior classes. So that is how the various the classes were assigned different occupations. So the Brahmins were, of course, assigned the noblest of the occupations. No class is to transgress and trespass upon the occupation of the other class. So there is a watertight compartment between the classes of the status, of rights and privileges. One class cannot, do what the other class is doing. This theory of an ideal society was upheld by the Brahmins and preached to the people. The soul of this theory is inequality. And this is a very fundamental statement that Baba Ambedkar has given here. This social inequality is not the result of historical growth. Inequality is the official doctrine of Brahmanism. Now we know that there is an inequality in the society because of the historical growth, because some classes are privileged, some classes are not privileged, and therefore there is this sort of what is called the inequality, social inequality, because of the result of the historical growth. But in this case, the inequality is the official doctrine of Brahmanism. The Buddha opposed it root and branch. That is what the Buddha did, because Buddha was the upholder of equality. Buddha saw that there is no fundamental difference between the 2 human beings, and people cannot be discriminated on any grounds of race, caste, religion, gender, language, linguistic background, and so on and so forth. This is just what is written in our Constitution of India. There cannot be any discrimination based on the caste, creed, race, place of birth, language, and region. There cannot be. So the Buddha was opposed to it, root and branch. He was the strongest opponent of the caste and the earliest and the staunchest upholder of equality. Now you see this very profound statement here. What Baba Sahib is saying, that the Buddha historically was the earliest and the staunchest upholder of equality. This is such a radical statement that if we try to study this statement of Baba Sahib Ambedkar, it's historically true. The Buddha was the first person to make equality the part of his religious doctrine, essential part of his religious doctrine. And we have seen that in the history of world, there were people who were teaching various philosophies, but nobody was talking about equality as a great spiritual value, as the great human value. And that is what the Buddha did. And that's why we know that the Buddhism spread across the world like a wildfire, because in Buddhism, there was nothing which will disconnect one human being from another human being, because the Buddha Dhamma is about connecting the people, about making people they belong to one human race. So you see, it's very profound, a statement that Baba Sahib Ambedkar has made here when he said that the Buddha was the strongest opponent of caste and the earliest and the staunchest upholder of equality. The Buddha was the earliest and the staunchest upholder of equality. There is no argument in favor of caste and equality which he did not refute. So people were trying to argue, saying that how caste is good, how Chaturvarna is good, how caste system, is good for the people and all. Buddha had, refuted all the arguments which were made in favor of the caste system. And we are going to look at that in this subsection, as Baba Sahib Ambedkar has very clearly given in this subsection. So let's look at them. There were many Brahmins who challenged the Buddha on this issue, but he silenced them completely. So there is a Asalayan Sutta, which is a very famous sutta, which is about how Brahminical pride of claiming that they are superior to everybody, and Asalayan Sutta is a very often quoted sutta. There is a Vassala Sutta or Vasetta Sutta. Then there is a Isukari Sutta, and then there are other suttas which are Tevijja Sutta and all, which challenge the supremacy based on the birth. So let's look at this. So there is a story of Asalayan, who was persuaded by the other Brahmins to go to the Buddha and convert his view against caste and inequality. So similarly, Asalayan went to the Buddha and placed before him the case in favor of the superiority of the Brahmins. This is what Asalayan said to the Buddha. The Brahmins maintain Gautama, because see, whenever the Brahmins are addressing the Buddha, they are not calling Bhante or whatever, they are calling Gautama. It shows the arrogance of the one particular class of people. So that said, Brahmins maintain Gautama, that only Brahmin form the superior class, all other classes being inferior, that only Brahmins form the white class, all other classes being black fellows, that purity resides in Brahmins alone and not in non-Brahmins, and that only Brahmins are Brahma's legitimate sons and born from his mouth, offspring of his, creations of his, and his heirs. What does Gautama say hereupon? And the Buddha's arguments against this claims of superiority, of the claim that they are being born from the mouth of the Brahma, or the primordial being called Purusha. In Rig Veda, the latter interpolation in Rig Veda is about the Purusha Sukta, where there was a primordial being called Purusha, and from the mouth of the Purusha or Brahma that are converted to Brahma came the Brahmins. So the Buddha, as Baba Sahib says, that the Buddha's answer simply pulverized Asalayan. He simply destroyed the argumentation of Asalayan in the following ways. The Buddha said, Asalayan, are not the Brahmin wives of Brahmins known to have their periods? How can it be otherwise? The Brahmin women must have their periods. So Asalayan, are not the Brahmin wives of Brahmins known to have their periods, and to conceive and to lie and give birth. Notwithstanding this, do Brahmins really maintain all what you have said, though they are themselves born of women like everybody else? You see, so the Brahmins are not born. No Brahmin is born from the mouth of the Brahma, as they claim. They are all born from the womb of their mother. So the Buddha simply asks, Asalayan, are not the Brahmin wives of Brahmins known to have their periods and to conceive and to lie and give birth? Notwithstanding this, do Brahmins really maintain all what you have said, though they are themselves born of women like everybody else? And to this, Asalayan has no answer, of course, because Asalayan himself is born from the womb of his mother, like all the human beings are born from the wombs of their mothers. So there is nobody has seen that somebody is coming from the mouth of any being. It's not possible, because this is not an organ from which the birth is given. So Asalayan gave no answer. The Buddha went further and asked Asalayan another question. Suppose, Asalayan, a young noble consorts with a Brahmin maiden. What would be the issue? Will it be an animal or human being? So, for example, this is applicable everywhere. If a black man marries a white woman, what happens? Is it some kind of a different animal or the human being? It's human being. Whoever marries anybody, irrespective of language or race or caste or whatever, the offspring is going to be a human being. So how does Brahmins claim that they are special? If they quote with, if anybody quotes with a Brahmin women, the offspring is definitely going to be the human being, not an animal. Again, Asalayan gave no answer to the question. As to the possibility of moral development, is it only a Brahmin and not a man of other classes who in this country can develop in his heart the love that knows no hate or ill being? Is there, you see, the capacity to cultivate the love, the capacity to cultivate compassion, the capacity to cultivate metta, the capacity to cultivate karuna is not limited to one class of people. That can be cultivated by all the classes of the people. It is not the privilege of one class of people. So the Asalayan answered, no, all four classes can do it. Replied Asalayan, Asalayan, have you ever heard, asked the Buddha, that in the Yona and Cambodia countries, because there were many countries, Buddhists, of course, living in the Magadha or Middle Kingdom, but there were other countries like Yona means, of course, Western countries, like the countries in the West. And there was a country called Cambodia countries. And in other adjacent countries, there are only two classes, namely masters and slaves. And that a master can become a slave and vice versa. So he's asking the question, haven't you heard that there are countries, of Yona and Cambodia, and there are only two classes of the people, master and slaves. And they are both, the master can be a slave and the slave can be master. So he says, he asked Asalayan this question, and Asalayan says, yes, I have heard so, replied Asalayan. If your Chaturvarna is an ideal society, why is it not universal? And that's a question that the Brahmin argue that, this is what is the very, 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 creation of the God. Then why the Chaturvarna system is not in America? Why is it not in Japan? Why is it not in Africa? Why is it not in other countries? Why? Why is it not there? Because if it's an ideal thing, it should be universal. An ideal has to be practiced universally. On none of these points was Asalayan able to defend his theory of caste and inequality. He was completely silenced. He ended by becoming a disciple of the Buddha. So that is what has happened to Asalayan here. And I recommend all of you to go into the, there are many good websites, there are many books, and read the Asalayan Sutta very carefully. But here Baba Ambedkar gives the very gist of the Asalayan Sutta, and it's very perfect argument even today. You can argue with anybody on this line, those who claim the supremacy based on their birth in a particular class of people. So there is another sutta, Vasetta Sutta or Vasala Sutta. A Brahmin by name Vasetta had embraced the religion of Blessed Lord. So he has become the Buddhist, and there were other Brahmins who used to abuse him for his conversion. And some of the Brahmins who converted to Buddhism were abused by the other Brahmins. There are a lot of historical sort of evidences of that. And Vasetta was ridiculed, abused by becoming the Buddha. One day he went to Buddha and disclosed to him what the Brahmins said of him. Then Vasetta said, the Brahmins, Lord, say thus. Only a Brahmin is of the best social grade. Other grades are low. You see, graded inequality. So people are graded. So what Vasetta said? The Brahmins, Lord, say thus, only a Brahmin is of the best social grade. Other grades are low. Only a Brahmin is of a clear complexion. You see, there were color codes. The Brahmins considered themselves to be white, and they consider others to be blacks, and there were different color codes, red, yellow, like that. So, what he says, only Brahmins are of pure breed, not they that are not the Brahmins. Only Brahmins are genuine children of Brahma, born of his mouth, offspring of Brahma, created by Brahma, heirs of Brahma. As for you, you have renounced the best rank and have gone over to that low class, to the shaven recluses, to vulgar rich, to them of swarthy skins, to the foot-born descendants. Such a course is not good. Such a course is not proper. Even this, that you, having forsaken that upper class, should associate it with an inferior class, to wit, with shavelings. See, the worst abuses were hurled against the Buddhist. The Buddha was called the Shudra. In the Esukari Sutra, there is a mention that, the Brahmins called the Buddha a Shudra. So, very important here. So, in these terms, Lord, do the Brahmins blame and revile me with characteristic abuse, copious, not at all stinted? Surely, Vasetta, said the Buddha. The Brahmins have quite forgotten the ancient lore when they say so. On the contrary, the wives of Brahmins, like all women of other classes, are seen to be with child, bringing forth and nursing children. And yet, it is this very worm-born Brahmins who say that the Brahmins are genuine children of Brahma, born from his mouth, his offspring, his creation, and his heir. By this, they make a travesty of the nature of Brahma. So see, this is what the Buddha has argued with Vasetta. Once the Brahmin Isukari went to the Buddha to argue with him three questions. The first question of Isukari he raised related to the permanent division of occupations. In defense of the system, he began by saying, I have come to ask you a question. The Brahmins say they shall serve nobody because they stand above all. Everyone else is born to serve them. Service, Gautama, is divided into 4: service of a Brahmin, service of a noble, service of a middle class man, or of a peasant, while a peasant may be served only by a peasant. For who else could? What does the Reverend Gautama say hereon? So he said that, the Brahmins are not going to serve anybody. Other classes are meant to serve them. This is what the Buddha answered. Buddha asked him a question. Is the whole world in accord with Brahmins in their fourfold division of service? Asked the Buddha. For myself, I neither assert that all service to be rendered, nor that all service is to be refused. If the service makes man bad, not good, it should not be rendered. But if it makes him better and not bad, then it should be rendered. This is the guiding consideration which should decide the conduct alike of nobles, of Brahmins, of middle class, men and peasant. Each individual should refuse service which makes him bad and should accept only the service which makes him a better man. You see, so, the service one can do to other, and there is no, privileges of one particular class. Anybody can serve anybody, as long as the Buddha says, that it should make a person a better man. It should not make a person a slave, isn't it? So the next question raised by Isukari was this: why should ancestry and lineage not have a place in determining the status of man? Because they claim that they have been pure race for a long time. They said that from their 7th generation, they have been keeping the purity of blood. And the Buddha has also demolished that argument of the purity of race. He said that no race is pure. No race can be pure. Everything is mixed. Everything has to be mixed because that is what is the nature of the human beings. And the next question was raised, like, why should ancestry and lineage not have a place in determining the status of a man? And the Buddha's answer is very beautiful here. To this question, the Buddha replied thus: as against pride of ancestry, the station into which a man happens to be born determines only his designation. It's only label where you are born. Be it a noble or Brahmin or middle class or peasant. Even as a fire is called after the material out of which it is kindled, and may thus be called either a wood fire or a cheap fire or a bracken fire or a cow dung fire. Just in the same way, the noble transcendent doctrine I ever is the source of true wealth for every man, birth merely determining his designation in one of the four classes. So it's just a label, given by the human being. It has nothing, it has no value in the reality, just like different fires, coming out from the different circumstances are called, but they are still fires. It's still a fire. We are still a human being, whatever labels are given by the society, whichever country we are born into, whichever linguistic backgrounds we are born into, the fact remains that we are essentially the same. Just like the name of the fire, we say this is the wood-borne fire, this is a cheap-borne fire, this is a bracken fire, it's a cow dung fire. But the fire is the fire, It's a beautiful example. It doesn't matter where we are born, which country we are born, what language we speak. The fact remains that we, all human beings, are of the same nature. So Buddha says lineage does not enter into a man's being either good or bad. So, what is your parental background, whichever class one is born, it doesn't enter into man's being either good or bad, nor do good looks or wealth. Even if you have good looks, you can be one of the very vilest of the person. Even if you may be very rich man, you can be very dirty human being. For you will find a man of noble birth who is a murderer, a thief, a fornicator, a liar, a slanderer, a man of bitter tongue, a tattler, a covetous person, a man of rancor or of wrong views. And therefore I assert that noble birth does not make a good man. Whatever family you are born in, it doesn't make you a good man or a bad man. Or again, you will find a man of noble birth who is innocent of all these vices, and therefore I said that it is not lineage that makes a man bad. The third question which Isukari raised was this question: with regard to the wage of earning a living assigned to each class. The Brahmin said to the Lord, Brahmins give a fourfold assignment of income: from alms for Brahmins, from his bows and arrow for the nobles, from plowing and tending cattle for middle-class man, and for the peasant by the carriage of crops on the pole slung over his shoulder. If any one of these deserts his occasion for something else, he does what he should not do, not less than a guardian who appropriates what is not his. What does the Reverend Gautama says on this? He says that, this is the duty of this class to, just earn their living by this occupation. The Buddha says, is the whole world in accord with this Brahmin classification? Asked the Lord. No, replied Isukari. And to Vasetta, he said, what is important is high ideals and not noble birth. So wherever you are born, but if you do not have the noble ideals or high ideals, then it is of no use. It's not important at all. It doesn't matter where you are born. It doesn't matter, whether you are rich or poor. It doesn't matter which race or which country you are born into. What matters is, do you have the high ideals? No caste, no inequality, no superiority, no inferiority. All are equal. This is what he stood for. So what does the Buddha stood for? He stood for no caste, no inequality, no superiority even, and no inferiority. And that is what the Buddha taught to Rahula. He says, you don't look at the other human beings as higher than you or lower than you or like you. They are all unique. Everybody is a unique human being. And this is what is very important. The verse number 51 is so important and so beautifully worded by Baba Ambedkar. He says, identify yourself with others. This is what Baba Ambedkar says beautifully in the verse number 51, summarizing the teachings of the Buddha very clearly and very categorically, when he says, identify yourself with others as they, so I. As I, so they. You see, this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words. Beautiful composition in language. So beautiful summarization of summary of the Buddha's teachings. Identify yourself with others. It's not easy for once to identify with others. And there is this Buddhism is all about exchanging yourself with others, because there is no self. It's the reality. This says that empty of selves, emptiness of self. There is no self. If we search, you will find that our existence is empty of self. So when we are talking about identifying yourself with others, actually we are practicing the very, very wisdom of the Buddha. When we exchange ourselves with others, first is begin with identifying ourselves with others. And in Tibetan, there is a teaching called, a very important teaching called, exchanging self with others. Tangling, the teaching is called Tangling, where you meditate, exchanging yourself with others. It's not easy. You begin with the fundamental identity with other people. If you begin to identify yourself with other people, and if the other people are in trouble, you try to do something about it. That's called compassion. When the other people are growing, you become very happy. It's called sympathetic joy, mudita. So the Buddha very categorically has said, and Baba Ambedkar has put it so beautifully and nicely in the verse number 51, when he says, identify yourself with others as they, so I. As I, so they. So said the Buddha. You see, this is a very, very concrete take into how we can fight the curse of inequality, how we can challenge the systems of oppression, how we can carry on with the work of emancipating people from the slavery of caste. And it's not easy. It's very difficult. Identifying yourself with others is not an easy work. It's a very difficult task, because we are so much occupied with ourselves. We live in the awe of ourselves. Everything gravitates towards oneself. Self. As Buddha says, we are obsessed with the self, and we are neurotically attached with ourself. Some sense of self is important to survive in the world. But, is the one Zen master says that we need a self enough to cross the street. Otherwise, if we don't regard ourselves while crossing the street as, self, we will be killed. So that much sense of self we need just to survive. We don't need that very concrete, very much obsessed, very much neurotic vision of the self. And the Buddha says, Anatma, he teaches Anatma, doctrine of Anatta, where he says that however hard you try to find in your experiences something concrete, something that never changes, you cannot find, because it doesn't exist. The body is empty of self. The mind is empty of self, and even beautifully explained by the Buddha. But the way the doctrine of Anatta can be practiced, the way the doctrine of Anatta can be put in place, is very beautifully explained here. Identify yourself with others. Cherish others. Look after the interest of others. Exchange yourself with others, as the Tibetan, the meditation of Tangling goes. And I think these words are so, important that we need to always, put them, in our memory all the time. As they, so I. As I, so they. What a beautiful sort of a composition, just a phrase, and it has such a profound sort of, the summary of the Buddha's teaching encapsulated in this just small phrase. As they, so I. As I, so they. That's it. If we have to capture the entire teachings of the Buddha in something very, epitomic, it is this: identify yourself with others. As they, so I. As I, so they. You bring this principle, allow you in wherever you are, in families or, in work situation, anywhere, any domain of your life, and you will see that how difficult it is to practice Buddhism. But because it's difficult, we have to practice, because we are practicing the truth. We are practicing the truth of anatta. We are practicing the truth of prajna. We are living the way the Buddha lived. And we have seen in the previous section as to how Buddha himself identified with others. We have seen the story of the Gilana Bhikkhu. We have seen the story of a Sikh Bhikkhu, where the Buddha has gone out of his way in Gandhara to help the man who was stinking. Whatever he touched, he polluted. But the Buddha, this didn't deter the Buddha. The Buddha went forth. The Buddha went to the needy. The Buddha went to the poor. The Buddha identified himself with everybody, whether you are a king, whether you are a noble, whoever you are. The Buddha doesn't care. Buddha identifies himself with the humanity within you. Buddha identifies himself with what makes you essentially a human being. And I think this profound subsection is so important that we need to look at this section very, very carefully, and we have to study it and we have to practice it. So I thought, I will cover only this subsection today because, this is so important, that Baba Saheb Ambedkar starts with the description of what is called the 4 Varna system, the Chatur Varna, and then it goes on the claim of the Brahmins of their supremacy based on the birth. And we have seen the reference of 3 sutta here, Asalayan Sutta, we have seen Vasetta Sutra, a brief reference of it, and Esukari Sutta. And we have seen how the Buddha has demolished those arguments against the superiority of based on the birth. And these arguments are still valid today. And then the Buddha goes on explaining what is very important in terms of a new society, the ideal society, which has to be based on, equality and no caste, only equality, no inferiority, no superiority even. And that's what we get very beautifully in this subsection of the Buddha and his Dhamma. So I will wait here and I will invite the question and answer.
Hello.
Hello.
Agdanna Jai Bhim.
Yes.
Jai Bhim Mangesh.
Jai Bhim ji.
Shall I ask one doubt?
Yes, please.
That is usual. Everybody knows that doubt. How to get rid of the caste system?
So this
it is so widely spread everywhere. How to get rid of?
Right.
Baba Saheb also has given the solution in his annihilation of caste. But I think that seems to be not working. Even if they marry intercaste, they do intercaste marriage, still the casteism is not going away. That woman who is from the upper caste or a person, they follow the same tradition when they come, and our man who is a lower caste person, he behaves according to that lady who is a Brahmin lady in his house. So means it is a Brahmanization of the backward class person ultimately.
See,
so
I think we are all familiar with this sort of things happening in the society. I think the focus here in this section is how we can ourselves decaste, because most of the times we criticize the caste system, but our minds are working according to the caste psychology, isn't it? And this feeling of being higher or lower, or being inferior or superior, or being equal to somebody is ultimately a trap, because it's based on the concept of self. So whatever is based on the concept of self, whatever is based on the concept of I, is going to produce the dukkha. So we know that the source of the Brahminical supremacy comes from the religion, from their sacred texts. So what do we do in this case? And that's what the solution Baba Saheb Ambedkar has given, because the caste is very deep. It's the notion of mind. It's in the culture. It's everywhere. Wherever you go in any direction, you face this monster of caste, and it's true for everybody. If you go anywhere, you face this monster of caste. So how to destroy something, how to destroy an idea, how to annihilate the idea is a very important question. And that idea comes into practice when we see the people are treated, the way people are, berated, the way people are put down. by the caste system. So what I'm trying to get it at here is that it's a program. The annihilation of caste is a program that we have all need to undertake. But here today our discussion is limited to one particular thing, that the Buddhism is about breaking the barriers between the man and man. It's not to disconnect one human being from another human beings. There is a fundamental identity, there is a fundamental reality that can easily let us connect with any human being born anywhere, even if we don't know their languages, even we don't know their culture, or whatever background they come from, rich or poor, it doesn't matter. We can fundamentally connect with every human being. So that is the crux of the matter. We are not, we should have a political program for the annihilation of caste. We should have an economic program for annihilation of the caste. But the question is, are we trying to create a society which is beyond caste? Are the Buddhists taking the responsibility to create a society beyond caste? Even among us, there are a lot of contradictions. And that's what Baba Ambedkar has given Buddhism. He says that the Buddhism will help us to do away with the differences between the rich and the poor, between the several castes. So forget what's happening when people marry this caste or that caste. Are we having a program, that help us to connect the caste within the so-called scheduled caste? Even among these so-called Buddhists, there is a gap between the rich and poor. And Baba Sahib Ambedkar was thinking that the Dhamma will be able to bridge that gap, will make the people feel that they are one. So I think these are bigger questions which need bigger answers. But today I think this answer is sufficient, that as I am, so they are. Okay, very beautifully put by Baba Sahib Ambedkar here. Anybody else?
Yes, I want to say something.
Yes, Sarana ma'am.
Mangeji, very well explained. Thank you so much. You are enlightening us with very nice, nicely. Baba Sahib has made everything so easy for us, and only thing, it is up to us that how we should understand and take it.
Yes.
Yes, there was one question just a few minutes before. So on that, I would like to focus some light. That when any boy or a girl from scheduled caste family, if they have a knowledge of Buddhism, good knowledge of Buddhism, and even though when they marry other caste person, whether it is a Maratha or a Brahmin or anybody, so that person should be in a position, or he should have an ability to counsel the person whom they have married and tell them what is right and what is wrong. Humanity is more important than the caste. So the humans are marrying each other, not the castes are marrying each other. And there should not be any differences in between.
Yes.
So to have a good communication is more important. And whatever the sanskar they have, it depends on that.
Yes.
If they know the Buddhism well, there should not be any problem. They will never follow any other things which are not right. I think so.
Nicely put up, madam. Very nicely put up.
Thank you so much.
Very good. Anyone? Yes, go on.
Very nicely described, especially the last line, identify yourself with others as they, so I, as I, so they. The anatta term you explained really very well here. These three suttas which have come in this passage, first one was the Asalayana Sutta, Vasita Sutta, and the Isukari Sutta. These come from the Tripitaka Majjhima Nikaya, especially dedicated to the Brahman Vagga. So if we see, when I attended the conference in Delhi University, there were representatives from the Sanskrit tradition, the Brahmin Pandits, the Prakrit, the Jain scholars, and the Pali scholars. So in in there, when they wanted to, as Buddhism has spread universally and has been accepted so very well, India is not an exception to accept by others, and by others I mean mostly the Brahmins. They were glorifying that Buddhism has dedicated one section, you know, as a Brahmin Vagga in their Tripitaka, and they were glorifying this term. They didn't see what's in it in the sutta, because if we look at the sutta and if we, as we are studying it deeply, Brahmin are having arguments with the Buddha, how they are superior, and they are getting defeated, and they are becoming the lay follower of the Buddhism itself. But the one thing which we need to understand is that we need to develop a culture. Brahmin have this culture of glorifying the things, the shiny objects. So what we can do as a Buddhist, the attention where people are looking at, but we need to go inside and study it deeply. That's what the takeaway we can take from this passage. I think so. And the other thing is that the sessions are going really very well, and you mentioned about the if I'm pronouncing it correctly, tangling practice of meditation. So if you can tell us more about that, that will be really beneficial to practice the anatta in our daily lives. Thank you.
If you can Google like Tangling, you will get to know, because very simply trying to exchange yourself with others. You imagine, you visualize that yourself is not basically different from their self, and their self is not different from yourself. So for example, you imagine yourself going to a hospital, and there are a lot of people lying on the bed, and one day you might be lying on the bed, you never know. We see a person, a person dying person, and one day maybe we will be that person dying, isn't it? So we try to exchange ourselves with others. We try to identify with themselves, and when we do that, we have this. This is the profound compassion. That is the compassion of Tathagata. That is the compassion of the Buddha. He strives hard to end the suffering in the world. He's not trying to end his own suffering. He's trying to end the suffering of the world. And when you have this attitude, this big thinking, this big vision of ending the suffering of the world, it naturally brings something very deep out of you. You cannot serve the world if you have a sense of self. As I said, as the Jain teacher says, you need the sense of self enough to cross the street. That's it. That's how much self you need. Okay, so you can Google Tangling and you will find tons of lectures on that. But it's a very beautiful teaching. And you see, identify yourself with others is the heart of the Buddha's teachings. Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, Mangesh-ji.
No.
I just wanted to say, when we were talking about the compassion, the Buddha has told us about the compassion, and that is really very true. When you love yourself, and same way if you try to love other people, there will be definitely a good coordination, and there will not be a problem at all. Whenever we do metta, so we do self-metta first, and with the self-metta, we do metta for others also. So in that, everything comes like whatever I should get, even the other should get the benefit of everything, like me. So that is the part of compassion only what I feel.
Good. So we got 10 more minutes. Anybody up for sharing or discussing or commenting, please go on.
Sir, only one reflection that I have got from today's lecture is, sir, we are having a lot of teachings, and we have evidences. Those who have adopted these teachings has turned down, changed his life. And now the question that Dr. Saab has raised, how this caste system will end. It starts from this only. Now teaching is there, only adaptation part we have to adopt individually.
Yes.
that will make the difference, I hope.
Very true, very true. It's a part of practice, you know, we need to put in practice what we are studying. But with the study comes the practice. So don't discount studies. Because the more deeply we understand something, the more easy for us to practice it. So anybody else?
Teachings are so beautifully said and beautifully explained over it.
Thank you, Umesh bhai.
Actually, with this Brahmin word, the original, if we see in Pali text, it has come and it is equivalent to Arhan. But the culture has developed as such that, they have taken this word, or they have steal this word and manipulated it in terms of caste. But if you look at the real definition of a Brahman, it is equivalent to becoming an Arhan. It is not less than that. It is a stage, and it is the qualities of a man or a woman that defines, but this concept got very polluted.
So in the Vasetta Sutra, there is a beautiful Vassala Sutra that I recommend all of you to read. It's a Sutta Petha. And every verse end up with this, na jaccha vassalo hoti, na jaccha hoti brahmano, kammuna vassalo hoti, kammuna hoti brahmano. Jaccha means by birth. By birth, nobody is down, or by birth, nobody is a Brahmin or whatever. Kammuna vassalo hoti, kammuna hoti brahmano. Kammuna means by your deeds, by your actions, by your intentions, you become who you are. So I think that's the word, like, the Buddha is called by many words. The Buddha is called Mahanaga, the Buddha is called Tathagata, the Buddha is called Sugata. So what Buddha did, Buddha has picked up and turned the things upside down. So it is not that Buddha is glorifying or the Brahmins. What he's saying that if you really want to be a Brahmin, you should practice my Dhamma. You should practice a noble eightfold path. If you really want to call yourself a noble or a superior being, you practice this. If you don't practice it, if you are filled with greed, if you are filled with hatred, if you are filled with delusion, then you are not qualified to be called, whatever, human being. Forget, Brahman. So I think these are just the spins on the word, and there are a lot of ways by which the Buddha has taught. So Buddha is not asking you to become a Brahmin. Buddha is saying that, if you want to be a real Brahmin, this is what you need to do. And Buddha is opposed to any labels. The Buddha is opposed to any designation, because these designations are just conventional. The language is just conventional. The caste system is about notions. It's about linguistic devices, isn't it? And we have to guard our minds from becoming prey to these labels, whatever labels they are. Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, I want to say something.
Yes.
Buddha has told us about the Dhamma, and this Dhamma is a law of nature, or it is a phenomena of nature. So if we follow the law of nature, if we behave or work according to the law of nature, definitely we will have a positive effect, and we will be happy. So there will not be any dukkha. So that is the important thing, that people have to follow law of nature, and that is Dhamma. So everybody, if whoever is following Dhamma, they understand how they have to live their life and how they have to avoid the complications or the problems. Beautiful. And about the Brahmin, the Buddha has already given the qualities of the Brahmin in one of the sutta. So those qualities, if you have those qualities, that person is definitely a Brahmin, not by caste, but by the ability. And that's the, accordingly, if you see those who are well qualified, well understanding the Dhamma, they should be called as Brahmin, not the person with the Brahmin caste. there should not be any religion in the individual who has a good ability or they have a knowledge or they are following the path of Dhamma.
Good. Good, very good. All right, we have 4 minutes short. If anybody would like to comment or say something, then please go on now. Otherwise, we will stop here today.
Sunilji asked about breaking the caste system barrier. I think so. Rather than looking at them, we should develop our own culture. They have huge history of their culture and they are maintaining their culture very well. What we are lacking, we need to focus on that and we need to develop a culture. How we can do it right now? Varshavas is going on. Many Buddhists practice and dedicate seriously practice the Dhamma in this duration, or going to Vihara, or if not this Sunday, Saturday, the Buddha and his Dhamma classes is really a part of developing a culture where we get together and exchange our ideas and share our reflections. So this is one small thing which we can develop the culture. The second thing is that practicing Uposatha on every Purnima, Amavasya, and Ashtami. This is also a very good way to develop a culture and to practice the Buddhist teachings and to implement, not just discuss about it, but to implement it in our lives. This is the way, and we have many festivals, Buddhist festivals also, and we have got the privilege with the Baba Sahib, many strong scholarly people. They have much knowledge. With the days we can dedicate to them and celebrate their Jayantis and Smriti days. That will help, to develop our culture and build a strong foundation for the generations to come. This is the solution to break the caste barrier. I think so.
Well done. Thank you so much all. And we will meet in the next class on the next Saturday. Thank you all for joining in. Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.